the office of the most powerful man in the world. It's what it's always been. And it wasn't made to intimidate, but many presidents have used this office for that purpose, to intimidate. But you can only intimidate if the power is centralized in you. Now that sounds kind of like a bad idea, that centralized power, but that's really what our system has. We have the different branches, but when you're talking about the president, all of the government agencies answer to him. The military answers to him. It's a pretty impressive room. I have actually stood in the real Oval Office while the president kind of called me on the carpet, and it is intimidating. But that's the system that we've always had. I want to do something tonight that I don't think any other network will do, and that is, let's take the president at his word. Of course, all of them have done that now for years. But let's take him at his word and really listen to what he's saying. What if the president and the top officials that all work for him are truly telling the truth on these three scandals? On the AP, on the Benghazi scandal, and the IRS scandal. Now, it's kind of hard to take them at their word, given how they've, shifted their story 6 or 7 times just in the last few days. It makes it difficult. We have to make quite a leap of faith to believe anything that they say. But tonight, let's do what no one else has done. Let's look at the storyline the administration wants America to believe. Remember, we're going to take their words and say, let's believe that. Follow that storyline to its conclusion and then say, where does that leave us? What does that mean about the most powerful room in the world? What does it say about the administration? What does that say about our future? What does that say about our direction? Are we headed in the direction that you were even aware of? Will we be more safe or less safe? So let's follow their lead. Let's take the president at his word. The mantra of this administration in the face of the scandals has been the same. We don't know. We just don't know.
We did not know.
I don't know. I just don't know when exactly.
I certainly did not know anything.
There was no knowledge here at the White House.
Okay. Now, let me just pull back just a little bit and make sure that you understand what they're asking you to believe and what it means if that actually is the case. Let's start on the IRS. The president wants you to believe that even though the IRS commissioner visited the White House 118 times, the IRS commissioner knew about the scandal for over a year, and the IRS commissioner reports directly to this office, they want you to believe that most of his senior White House staff knew of the scandal for about a year. The media was reporting on the targeting of the Tea Party and religious groups in February 2012. We reported it. We broke the news over a year ago. The charges were brought up at congressional hearings last year. His own team was debating internally with IRS officials on how to manage public relations fallout. Despite all of that and more, what they're asking you to believe is no one walked into this office. No one ever opened up the door and said, Mr. President, you have to know what's going on. He didn't know anything.
We were not aware of any activity or of any review conducted by the Inspector General until several weeks ago.
I can assure you that I certainly did not know anything about the IG report before the IG report had been leaked through the press.
Okay. I personally find it virtually impossible for the president not to have known anything about the IRS scandal when everything is happening around the Oval. There are a million ways he could have found out. He said he found out about the news. Well, the news was reporting this for almost 2 years, that something was going on. He never was curious and looked up from the newspaper or from what he was watching and said, hey, is that true? His staff, the 118 visits to the White House, actually listening to the Tea Party people who were voicing the concerns, he could have found out from them. So what does it actually mean if he didn't know? let's take him at his word. He didn't know. The only possible way he could not know what was happening at the IRS is he is in an isolation chamber. He is completely disengaged and out of the loop. That would mean that he is not in charge of what's happening in the agencies that answer to him. If that is true, are you comfortable with it? Why is he so uninformed and out of touch? How could he possibly effectively govern if he is that far removed? If your boss was that far removed and had no idea that massive scandal was happening, and no one who had access to the boss had the courage or the foresight or the decency to crack the door and say, boss, you got to know what's going on here. If he is not the one being informed and updated and is steering the ship, who is? Is there anyone? Being that our government is made up of elected representatives, the American people have a right to know who is calling the shots, because we put people to represent us to call the shots. They then have to oversee those agencies. But if they're not calling the shots, who is? And who elected them? If it's not the president, who is it? Is keeping the president out of the loop intentional? Or is it a result of an overbloated bureaucracy? If President Obama's storyline is accurate on the IRS, he is either not in charge, or big government is failing, or he's lying. But it's really only those things. On the Associated Press and on the Fox News scandals, once again, the White House just didn't have a clue.
Other than press reports, we have no knowledge of any attempt by the Justice Department to seek phone records of the Associated Press.
Okay. The man in charge of the Department of Justice is the Attorney General, Eric Holder. This is the guy whose job it is to do these things. But he said he didn't have a clue. He had no clue either. He claimed he didn't know anything about anything on this.
I don't know what happened there with the interaction between the AP and the Justice Department. I was recused from the case, and an ongoing matter about which I know nothing. So I'm not in a position really to answer.
Okay. Holder said the one thing he is clear on, he, quote, certainly did not alert the White House. Okay, so now what does that mean? If the president really didn't know that American lives were being placed in harm's way, remember, the reason why they're tapping the phone lines is because this guy says one of the most serious leaks of all time happened.
This was a very serious leak, and a very, very serious leak. I've been a prosecutor since 1976, and I have to say that this is among, if not the most serious, it is within the top 2 or 3 most serious leaks that I've ever seen.
Okay. His boss works at that desk. It was so serious that it was a national security threat. And the President of the United States had no clue? None? Americans were in danger, the most serious leak since 1973, and he's so detached from the office of the presidency, campaigning for gun control or playing golf or going on vacation, whatever it is he's doing, that he didn't know that there was a leak threatening American lives. Didn't know that. If the president is not informed on serious threats to national security like this, what other security threats is he not being informed on? How can he possibly give the speech he gave today on national security? He, by their own admission, is not being brought into the loop. So what else is he missing? And does that make you and your family more or less safe? And what does it mean for freedom of speech? Does the president's indifference and disconnection from the issue promote free speech or stifle it? What message does it send if the president shows no interest in stopping the systematic targeting of whistleblowers and members of the press? Remember, it's not just the AP, it's Fox and now CBS. he's indifferent. He didn't know. There was no one to blow the whistle. So does that cause more or less people to risk their lives in order to hold government accountable? If less people are willing to speak out against corrupt members of the government, does that increase or decrease our government power and abuses of power? Which is it? Let's move to Benghazi. All of the top officials had no earthly idea that any trouble was on the horizon in Benghazi.
We were not aware of any actionable intelligence indicating that an attack on the U.S. mission in Benghazi was planned or imminent.
We had no actionable intelligence that an attack on our post in Benghazi was planned or imminent.
They had no idea. The president said he didn't know that there were requests for additional security.
I was not personally aware of any request. Obviously, we have an infrastructure that's set up to manage requests like that. But we're going to find out exactly what happens. Ultimately, though, anytime there is a death of an American overseas, I want to find out what happened, because my most important job as president is keeping the American people safe.
Okay, then that probably should, then somebody, if that's your most important job, you're stated, then people probably should come into that office and inform you on what's going on. In fact, they shouldn't just do it, you should demand it. But he and the rest of the administration didn't have any idea.
We weren't told they wanted more security again. We did not know they wanted more security again.
I didn't see those requests. They didn't come to me. I didn't approve them. I didn't deny them.
If the administration can miss all of the intelligence warnings that came in advance of the Benghazi attacks, where the people on the ground were literally begging for help, how ready are they to stop the next terrorist attack? If the President of the United States and the Secretary of State don't have any information, they're not connected or apparent interest in the safety precautions for the people in Benghazi, which is one of the most, or probably was the most dangerous and violent locations in the world at the time, on September 11th, are the American public servants overseas more or less safe? Are you more or less safe? If the administration is willing to go against all of the intelligence reports and then concoct a bogus story about a video while claiming it was the best available intelligence they had, two questions. What else are they willing to lie about? But if we take them at their word for the purpose of this monologue, what else are they willing to believe from some faceless person that we don't know coming into the office to brief them and say, sir, that's the best intelligence, when it wasn't? Because they're so disengaged. What else are they believing? And from whom? And in seeing that they haven't been outraged by the YouTube video lies and thus haven't even exposed the person who entered that into the conversation and then fired the person responsible for that, does it make it more or less reasonable that they see security and intelligence the same way you do? Will the rest of the world trust us more or less if these guys really didn't know? If the president, as laid out by Leon Panetta, said to the Pentagon at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, with hours of fighting left to go, you guys just dispatch the forces and do what you have to do, and then never checked, didn't ask for them to check back in, didn't check himself, wasn't involved at all, are you as an American citizen comfortable with that? That the military-industrial complex isn't being watched over by an elected official? Now, I would personally rather have the military watch over themselves than a politician doing it, because they always make the wrong calls. But that's not the way our system works, and those on the left certainly have never felt that way. Is the left comfortable that the president is not involved with ongoing military decisions? He's not even called or consulted. And then fast and furious, the president exercised his executive privilege and claimed he and Eric Holder were not aware of Fast and Furious.
I have complete confidence in Attorney General Holder in how he handles his office. He has been very aggressive in going after gun running and cash transactions that are going to these transnational drug cartels in Mexico. There's been a lot of cooperation between the United States and Mexico on this front. He's indicated that he was not aware of what was happening in Fast and Furious. Certainly I was not.
Okay, there it is again. So what does this one mean? Well, let's take the president at his word. He did not know. The President of the United States and the top man at the Department of Justice had no earthly idea that their own people are literally arming drug cartels with thousands of guns. And they haven't been fired or even found. Does that make Americans and our neighbors in Mexico more safe or less safe? If some rogue government underlings can get away with arming deadly drug cartels with guns and escape the notice of the management, what other dangerous activities are they also engaging in that we don't know about and that he clearly won't know about either? How can a president lead if he doesn't have a clue on what's happening around him? He doesn't know what's going on at the IRS, where Americans are becoming victimized. He doesn't know what's going on at the DOJ, and both American citizens and members of the American press become victims. He doesn't know what's going on overseas, and Americans become victims, murdered in their own cold blood. He doesn't know what's going on with Fast and Furious, and American Border Patrol agents become victims, as Brian Terry was murdered. And the people across the border are murdered by guns that were run by people in his administration. This is the scenario the administration wants you to believe. It's just been condensed in a 10-minute period. It's a scenario where, through their incompetence and indifference, Americans suffer, and then when they find out about it, afterwards they vow to get to the bottom of it. But have they gotten to the bottom of any of these yet? Benghazi? No. Well, the filmmaker went to prison, but that wasn't even part of it. The IRS scandal? Nope. Haven't done anything on that one. Fast and Furious? Nope. AP and Fox and now CBS scandal? Nope. There has been, in the time that these have been going on, a lot of celebrity parties. There's been a lot of vacations. There's been a lot of campaigning against the Second Amendment. And there has been an awful lot of playing of golf. But this administration hasn't produced any results on any of the things they vowed to get to the bottom of it. They only continue to produce additional victims, American victims. So this is the story. This is the story they will have you believe. That the guy who sits in this office is uninformed. He doesn't know. But he'll get to the bottom of it. If he's not running the country, then who is? I believe if this is the story they want you to believe, it is so bad, it begs one more question. How bad, then, is the truth?